Welcome back to Dentro La Storia. Today we'll talk about a topic, yes, that has to do with naval forces. That's why you see the background you're now familiar with behind me. But it's a bit of a special topic because today we're celebrating an anniversary, or if you prefer, a birthday. It was March 3rd, 1969, exactly 57 years ago, when the concept of naval aviation was revolutionized in an epochal way, not through new technologies, those would come later, not through the use of new aircraft carriers, those would come later, but through a new concept of combat. Today we celebrate the birthday of what became known as Top Gun, the training school for the best pilots of the United States Navy. Today we celebrate a very special birthday because in the public perception, Top Gun is a cultural symbol even before being a military one, a brand, an aesthetic, a heroic story, the power of the movies, the mirrored sunglasses, the leather jackets, the Kawasaki motorcycles, all within the operational historical reality of the United States Navy. The United States Navy Fighter Weapons School, that's the real name, was created as an urgent response to a measurable crisis in combat effectiveness that emerged during the Vietnam War. Telling the true story of Top Gun means reconstructing the doctrinal context of the 1960s, the gap between superiority, technological priority, and operational results. The way a military institution reacts to data that contradicts its until then rock-solid certainties. And you too, so for a moment, forget about the aircraft carriers in the Indian Ocean with the morning mist, forget the music, forget the Top Gun theme by Harold Fadmeyer, forget Tom Cruise and his Pete Maverick Mitchell. Today we're talking about the real Top Gun, and you'll be amazed. At the end of the Korean War, in the early 1950s, the doctrine of American aviation, both of the newly formed United States Air Force and the United States Navy, was strongly influenced by one assumption. Maneuvered air combat was considered a thing of the past, something ancient. The introduction of onboard radar, guided missiles, and the arrival of supersonic interceptors, that the future of air-to-air combat would be dominated by beyond visual range with electronic target identification and engagement at a distance. You identify with identification friend or foe. Identification friend or foe, launch the missile, and don't think about it anymore. The almost exclusive reliance on air-to-air missiles, first the Air Intercept Missile, 7 Sparrow, and then the Air Intercept Missile, 9 Sidewinder, and in some cases, the removal of the onboard cannon, like in the early versions of the F-4 Phantom II, turned out to be a problem in the long run. Pilots had gotten out of the habit of training for dogfights, for close-range aerial combat. From an engineering point of view, in the mid-1960s, the United States Navy practically carried the pinnacle of Western technology. From a tactical point of view, all these elements together, the lack of habit for dogfighting, reliance on missiles, and even the absence of cannons on several aircraft, had created a gap in skills, a gap that had become evident during the Vietnam War. Vietnam, which was divided into two, South and North, with the South supported by the United States, was ravaged by a long war, first and foremost political, and it was a war that saw different types of equipment facing each other. North Vietnam used Mikoyan-Gurevich, 17S Mikoyan-Gurevich, 19S and Mikoyan-Gurevich, 21S aircraft designed and built by the Soviets, in some cases copies, or built under license in China. And mechanically speaking, they were inferior to the latest achievements of American engineering. But the data collected between 1965 and 1968 in anticipation of the escalation showed a worrying picture. The air-to-air kill ratio, that is the ratio of victories in air-to-air combat, stood at 2.5 to 1, which meant that for each aircraft shot down by North Vietnam, the United States Navy could claim 2.5 enemy aircraft shot down. You might say, well, it's better to win more than to lose, of course, but this figure was drastically lower than in the Korean War, not to mention World War II. If in the Korean War the ratio was 10 to 1, sometimes even 12 to 1 in World War II, it was 14 to 1. Moreover, many shoot-downs had occurred in close combat, which was not foreseen by the official doctrine. To further complicate the situation, the rules of engagement were set by a political and strategic context. To avoid diplomatic incidents with China and the Soviet Union, United States pilots were often required to obtain a positive visual identification before engaging. This required a close encounter with the enemy, something that many pilots were not used to, and so a need arose. The Chief of Naval Operations, Admiral Thomas Murray, assigns Captain Frank Holt to conduct a complete review of the United States Navy's air capabilities. Not just an investigation limited to aircraft, but a systemic analysis that includes training, doctrine, maintenance, command and control, and operational culture. From all this, Top Gun will be born. The investigation led by Captain Frank William Holt is unprecedented. His work, which ends in a report called the Holt Report, is not just a single document, but a collection of studies, technical attachments, statistical tables, and operational recommendations. In short, between 1968 and the early days of 1969, Captain Holt forever revolutionized the approaches to aerial warfare conducted by Navy pilots. Holt's approach is all-encompassing, and one of his targets in the report is the belief that guided missiles had made maneuvering combat obsolete, a glaring mistake made by the pilots and before them by the tacticians. For this reason, Holt, in his conclusion, focuses on training. His document emphasizes that United States Navy pilots had to be Captain Vassallo, Savings Vassallo, capable savings. Captain Vassallo procedurally, but at the same time they were insufficiently prepared for realistic air-to-air combat. Because air combat maneuvering training, air combat maneuvering, was often limited and mostly theoretical. In classrooms, nothing more. There was a lack of in-depth knowledge of the performance of enemy aircraft. The exercises did not faithfully replicate real combat conditions. And above all, there was no center dedicated to the development and standardization of tactics. Here comes the Holt Report with its key recommendations, with the suggestion to train tactical instructors capable of developing new procedures and testing tactics in a controlled way. Finally spreading the updated knowledge within the fleet, something new is born. The Holt Report is an uncomfortable document. It puts several chains of command in crisis, but it is accepted because results matter more than anything else, even politics. The transition from analysis to implementation is surprisingly fast. On March 3, 1969, less than a year after Frank Holt was assigned to study the problem, at the Naval Air Station in Miramar, California, the United States Navy Fighter Weapons School is officially established. It is an experimental facility with limited resources and a staff chosen for their skills, not their status. The legend of Top Gun is about to be born. The United States Navy Fighter Weapons School did not start as a fully structured institution. At first, it was something pragmatic, informal, and as we said, experimental. When this institution is officially opened at Miramar, the school consists of a very small number of officers assigned administratively. Within a fighter squadron, the 121st, a training unit, on the F-4 Phantom II, which was a cutting-edge aircraft at the time. The goal is not to create a parallel structure to the fleet, quite the opposite. Rather, it is to establish a core of advanced expertise capable of quickly influencing operational training. The new school is led by Corvette Captain Dan Peterson, callsign Yank, a fighter pilot with operational experience and a strong analytical inclination. Yank has quite a task, especially since he doesn't have a manual, a predefined curriculum, or a ready-made doctrine. He has to improvise. He has to rely on his experience to select personnel and make them as effective as possible. The absence of a ready-made doctrine is one of the distinctive features of the emerging Top Gun VAR, a different working method with a detailed analysis of real combat engagements carried out previously. The in-flight testing of tactics, continuous discussion between instructors and students, and constant review of proposed tactics and results. It is an operational laboratory, But it also has another principle, that of train the trainers. What does it mean? That every Top Gun student who attends an intensive course for several weeks returns to his assignment in the fleet. He has another assignment to involve all the other pilots who haven't been to Top Gun and to pass on the information, to train them. So the graduate becomes a trainer in his own time, able to constantly update others. And year after year, through another tool, the debriefing, which becomes extremely important and central, all this changes the approach of the United States Navy. The enemy is studied in order to defeat them. They study maneuverability, energy limits, the strengths and weaknesses of the Mikoyan-Gurevich, 17 SAS, the Mikoyan-Gurevich, 21S, and the aircraft used by the enemy. The impact initially underestimated is surpassed by the evidence that is tangible. There is greater tactical discipline, there is better coordination between the pairs of pilots and the various sections. Weapons are also being used in a more rational, more effective way. There is greater situational awareness. But it's clear that so far we're still in the realm of theory. What happens in Vietnam? What is the impact of the Top Gun pilots? So let's go directly and look at the results. When the first classes of Top Gun graduates return to their units and pass on, according to the Train the Trainers doctrine, what they have learned, the test is immediate and it produces results. Between 1970 and 1972, the air-to-air kill ratio rises from 2.5 to 1 up to 11 or 12 to 1. They return to the standards of the Korean War. This means that Top Gun works, that tactics are more important than just technology, and that the rediscovery of maneuvering combat is essential. It has a key of modern reinterpretation, which is integrated with sensors, with missiles, with contemporary procedures. But above all, it teaches pilots the ability to react and adapt in the moment, even in unfavorable conditions. The spread of the method within the United States Navy is extremely rapid. In just a few years, the tactics developed by the school are integrated into the operational manuals. Squadron exercises adopt increasingly realistic scenarios, obviously also using computer simulations. And the culture of rigorous debriefing begins to spread even outside the fighter weapons school. It even reaches the aircraft carriers. And here we also enter into an implicit comparison, the one between the United States Navy and the Air Force. Not a competition, but the results achieved by the United States Navy clearly attract the attention of the Air Force as well. The latter, although having essentially comparable resources, had initially followed a different training path, achieving similar benefits, such as the red flag or the development of its own aggressor squadrons. Top Gun was not alone, but it had represented an institutional precedent, the demonstration that advanced, realistic, centralized training could transform the operational effectiveness of an entire Air Force and make it a benchmark. But when the Vietnam War ended, and it ended in defeat for the United States, not in the field, but at the political and strategic level, the Top Gun program did not end. The United States Navy Fighter Weapons School continues to develop because we are still in the climate of the Cold War. There is always a need to keep learning, knowing, and growing. The Cold War is the reference scenario, and the technological advancement of aircraft, the improvement of integrated air defenses, and the increasing emergence of the issue of electromagnetic warfare, and the need to cooperate jointly with other air forces. It forces Top Gun to adapt quickly, focus through greater emphasis on tactics, multi-ship, through integration with command and control systems, through coordination with naval and missile assets, through preparations for operations in a highly challenging environment. New platforms, new challenges, new aircraft. The F-14 Tomcat arrives, the main star of the Top Gun movies. It's a new aircraft that replaces the Phantom with the ability to operate in multiple combat environments and with many operational capabilities. The Cold War, as we know, ended in 1991. The collapse of the Soviet system, the collapse of the Soviet Union, is the end of an era, but it's not the end of a mission. In 1996, the Miramar base changed its face. It was transferred to the United States Marine Corps, and officially ceased to be part of the United States Navy. So it was necessary to relocate Top Gun, doing much more than just a simple move. The United States Navy opted for a solution that would redefine the role of the school, the Naval Air Station in Fallon, in Nevada, in the desert. Not like in the second movie in San Diego, absolutely not. We're talking about the Nevada desert. Why? Because Fallon offers vast airspace and land, the possibility for realistic live-fire exercises, the integration with complex ranges, and a geographic isolation that's functional for advanced adaptation. Top Gun is incorporated into the Naval Strike and Air Warfare Center, which later evolved into the Naval Aviation Warfighting Development Center. It's a further step. It becomes an integrated development center for naval air tactics. Years go by, an adjustment is needed. The F-14 is gradually retired from active service. It's no longer usable. It's considered obsolete. They move on to an advanced fourth-generation aircraft, the fighter attack 18 Super Hornet. It's multi-role, capable of providing more solutions and adapting better than the old Tomcat. Top Gun has to overcome the clear distinction between air-to-air and air-to-surface, develop new integrated tactics, and train instructors who can think in terms of operational packages, no longer just a single specialty. From the Cold War to the changes of the late 90s and the turn of the millennium, Top Gun quickly adapts its focus, including the management of irregular threats and terrorism, which strike in very different ways. In addition to operations in congested airspace or coordination with multinational coalitions, learning and adapting becomes a method. It's a new leap, a conceptual leap. With the arrival of the 21st century, Top Gun faces a different challenge compared to the ones it faced in the past. If Vietnam had challenged the idea of the missile as the only solution, and if the Cold War had imposed systemic integration, the arrival of fifth-generation aircraft has changed the very nature of aerial combat. With the introduction of the F-35 Lightning II and the ultimate evolution of the Super Hornet into increasingly specialized versions, combat is no longer defined only by maneuver, speed, and relative position, but also by information management. The pilot becomes a decision maker, a manager of complex systems, from individual maneuvers to the decision-making process, from air duels to creating operational effects, from the global platform to the system of multiple systems. Of course, the new aircraft, the F-35, has represented for Top Gun what the Tomcat was in the 1970s, an automatic, natural solution, but also a doctrinal problem to solve, because the new aircraft, with stealth principles, raises several questions. How do you take advantage of low observability without turning it into a dependency? So going back to the Vietnam era, when there was excessive reliance on the missile component or on technology in general, how do you integrate fourth and fifth generation stealth, which are quite different from each other? How do you preserve the ability to adapt in case the systems degrade? Top Gun is facing these new challenges called ballistic threats, hypersonic threats, advanced electronic warfare, joint and coalition operations in great power competition. Training has always been a fundamental part of Top Gun, and the continuity in the transformation of the school, always through the centrality of the debriefing, is something that is part of everyday life. But in this final part of our video, we also want to talk about that deep overlap between historical reality and the myth built up in the media. In the cinema of Top Gun, starting from the 1980s, from that film, that wonderful film, the music, the visuals, the iconography, the cultural representation of Top Gun has gradually overshadowed the real nature of the school, turning it into a symbol of individualism and competition. They even go so far as to make aerial combat into a spectacle. Top Gun has been portrayed as a story of heroes, when in reality it is something different. It is the result of a systemic failure that was recognized and corrected. The real Top Gun has little to do with what you saw in the movies. It's not so much an elite school as it is a feedback mechanism. Within a large military organization, there is a great discipline of wild horses like Maverick. Popular storytelling emphasizes charismatic biota, natural talent. The operational reality of Top Gun values tactical discipline, teamwork, standardization of procedures, and the repeatability of correct decisions. In essence, the exact opposite of what you've seen in the movies. Top Gun today is a continuous evolution that does not deny its origins. Telling the real story of Top Gun within the United States Navy today means telling how a military organization is able to learn from its own mistakes, not through the brilliant intuition of a few, but through analysis, acceptance of mistakes, and transformation of internal culture. A true revolution. That's what we've tried to tell you about today. Top Gun wasn't created to win awards for plaques, for crests, not even to inspire movies or to build myths. It was created to answer a brutal and necessary question. Why are we losing? And what do we need to do? What do we need to change so we don't lose again? It's in this question that the true legacy of Top Gun lies. But we all like to dream. Do you like to imagine yourself as Pete Mitchell or as Ice Kazansky on the Tomcat or the Super Hornet, inside the cockpit, ready to be launched by a catapult, first steam-powered, now electric, into the sky, diving into the clouds, imagining the Top Gun anthem by Ariel Falkmeyer, or Danger Zone, or Mighty Wings, humming them while we're on board our plane, or while we're speeding wildly down the highways on our powerful Kawasaki's. It's nice to dream, but let's stay focused on the story. Dreaming is one thing, reality is another. Top Gun was created, and we've told you about it today on its anniversary, because of a media-driven need for something else. After the movie, after its release in the mid-1980s, crowds of young Americans rushed to the United States Navy recruitment offices. Dreaming of becoming like Tom Cruise or like Val Kilmer, the reality was different. But sometimes the overlap between myth and reality, between cinema and historiography, helps. It helps to achieve certain goals. Certainly, Top Gun achieved its goal, always improving by promoting real and healthy values within military cooperation and overcoming those rock-solid certainties, which weren't so rock-solid after all. And even today, despite technological advancement, despite artificial intelligence, they make it clear that the real weapon, above all, is not the missile, it's not the aircraft, it's the human brain. It's the ability to react clearly and with good training, even in the worst and most stressful moments.